Julia, thank you for joining me here in San Francisco. It's great to meet you.
Pleasure to be here.
Please start with telling me a bit about Millendo and your kind of journey and where you are right now.
Yeah, Millendo is a company focused in orphan endocrine diseases. We've been around for 8 years now. The company was started back in 2012, and we've worked in 6 different indications over 8 years, and are fortunate now to have our lead asset, livoletide, in a pivotal study for Prader-Willi syndrome, and data is going to come out in the first half of this year. So we're really excited about how far we've come in this period of time.
Very exciting. And what about your personal background prior to this role? What's your journey been?
I'm a biochemist by training. My story starts really here in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I did my PhD up the hill at UCSF. But I went straight from there working into the business side of biotechnology companies. I really like being at that business science interface and helping translate the scientific discoveries into drugs that can benefit patients. So I've worked on that side of the business since the late 90s. I think I was just telling you that this is my 21st JP Morgan conference.
And Millendo is quite a young company, but you went public in 2018, so quite a rapid growth, rapid journey. What's been key to achieving that?
I think it was really crucial for us to access the public markets as we were getting into pivotal studies, thinking about NDA filing and commercial build. That's hard to do, with venture dollars, and there's a lot of opportunity here for us to move forward commercially. And our intention is to build our own sales force and be able to market the first ever treatment for hyperphagia and Prader-Willi syndrome in the U.S. So that's an exciting trajectory for us over the next 2 years, and accessing the capital to do that and to really maximize the pace of innovation to translate things to patients was our real drive here.
Right. And when you look back on that journey, I'm sure there's been a few twists and turns. What are some of the key decisions that you feel you've made in retrospect that have got the company to where it is now?
Yeah, we've definitely had more than our share of twists and turns. Biotech often have setbacks, and we've had more than our share. Drug development is a hard business.
Sure.
And I think some of the key decisions we've made in some cases have been the really, really hard ones to terminate efforts on drugs. We had a drug that we were incredibly excited about for women's health care. It was polycystic ovary syndrome and menopausal hot flashes, where we had some incredible efficacy data from some phase 2 studies that we were incredibly excited about, but we also saw some safety liabilities showing up in clinical trials with that drug. So in 2017, we made the correct but very difficult decision to terminate development in that program altogether. The other key decisions we've made along the way have really been about the people we've gotten involved, and that's honestly where I'm most proud of the team that we've put together, ranging from my colleagues on our leadership team to the broader team in our offices to our board of directors that is, I think, a particularly strong group, very diverse group from top to bottom, and has really supported us as we have had those twists and turns, and has given us that opportunity to survive through the setbacks, flourish through the good times, and put us in a great place today.
And you mentioned the team there. Having a look through the profiles of the management team, they're quite diverse skills, as you mentioned. Just tell me a bit more about who's involved there and your approach to getting the right people involved.
Yeah, it's really crucial to make sure you have all the necessary skill sets covered within a leadership team, and particularly those that complement my deficiencies. In fact, I've never worked in a company that has actually had a commercial product. I don't know the commercial world. I come from being a molecular biologist and working at the bench. I worked in business development. That's more my world, and so it's been particularly crucial that we have a strong leader in the commercial planning side. Tom Hoover is our recently promoted Chief Commercial Officer and has been with the company for several years now as we've assessed the target product profile, designed our pivotal study, and now is in driving our launch planning. So we've brought on key people throughout the evolution of the company, and do have key leaders with deep experience in biotech and pharmaceutical, running from preclinical, clinical, regulatory, CMC, commercial, legal, the number of people you need kind of behind the scenes once you're a public company to do all the SEC reporting and SOX compliance and everything else is not to be taken lightly. You need the right folks in place there to make sure you can meet those responsibilities as a public organization. And I've been really pleased to have such strong folks who have been willing to join the team and partner with me to build Millendo.
Yeah. And you talk there about bringing in folks that have, complementary skills and maybe strengthen the areas where you're not so strong. Is that quite hard to do as a leader? Is there an expectation that you should be good at everything?
There's certainly been a lot of learnings from me as I've evolved into leading this organization. When I started Millendo with my co-founders 8 years ago, this was my first time CEO role, and I'd been in the industry for over a dozen years prior to that, worked in several other companies, but it's different in the CEO role, and especially when you're a Series A early company, less than 10 people, you're used to rolling up your sleeves and being involved in every aspect of the organization. We're now about 40 people. We're now running clinical trials in 3 to 4 different continents. We've got a lot of other things going on, and I cannot possibly be involved in everything, nor should I be. In fact, as a public company, a lot more of my time needs to be out telling the story, meeting with the investors, interfacing with the external world, and therefore I've had to learn how important it is to entrust my team, make sure I've brought on people that I can turn things over to. They keep me posted, but they can keep their areas of responsibility proceeding well, and we've really been quite successful for that. I think in 2019 in particular, it was really a breakout year for the company. It was our first full year operating as a public company. We recruited our pivotal study in record time from start to finish in just 8 months. We brought on 158 subjects in an ultra-rare disease. And it really had a year we're quite proud of now heading into 2020 that has even more opportunity in front of us.
Sure. But it's also quite a competitive space. So you look at, for example, Prader-Willi syndrome, which is one of the areas that you focus on. There's more and more companies moving into the rare disease space, and you're not the only player there. So how do you stay competitive and keep pushing the boundaries?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I do think it's wonderful that there is so much more interest in these rare diseases, because patients like Prader-Willi patients have nothing right now. Patients die on average by around 30 years old. And that's even with extreme measures to try to control their environment and do other things to protect them. So there are a number of people developing drugs in this space. There's still nothing on the market. We hope to be the first, and that was one of the things that was really important about how well we executed this year with our clinical trial. There's 3 pivotal studies that are running right now in Prader-Willi. We were the third of those to start. So we got our clinical trial started in March of 2019, about 4 months and 10 months behind 2 other companies. And we were actually the very first to finish recruitment. So we completed recruiting patients in November, and now should be the first with top-line results, and assuming those meet everything we've seen in phase 2, hopefully can be the first to file an NDA. So in a more crowded space, there is a lot of advantage of being the first to the patient, which means executing very smoothly. I do ultimately think that in some of these diseases, though, there is going to be room for more than one treatment. The goal here is to improve the patient experience, extend life. And as much as I truly believe in livoletide and what we've already shown in our phase 2 studies, I do not realistically expect that any one drug is going to cure all patients. And so if other therapies come along, we will find room in this marketplace to maximize the opportunity and improve the experience for patients.
And you mentioned there the speed of recruiting the patients for the trial, which is a real challenge in rare diseases. What was your secret there? How did you achieve that?
I think there were 3 really important things. One was how well our team executed. We brought on 38 clinical sites in the US, Europe, and Australia in a very rapid period of time. So 38 sites is a lot of sites for a clinical trial. We had already had clinical experience with livoletide in Europe, and so bringing on additional clinical sites was very important, and partnering with those sites and helping them get up to speed, helping them make the patient visits to the clinic as smooth as possible. Prader-Willi patients have a lot of behavioral issues. They have a lot of challenges, and breaking them outside of their normal home life is really, really difficult. So we partnered with an organization that helped book their travel and make their experience of actually having to participate in clinical trials as minimally disruptive as possible. So step one in recruiting very quickly, a lot of sites, smooth operations, and really make this a reasonable possibility for the patients. Number two was really strong phase 2 clinical data. Our phase 2 study was the largest ever run in Prader-Willi syndrome. 47 patients, multi-center, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled, with very clinically meaningful, statistically significant results. And so, if you are a physician or a caregiver or a patient and you're deciding what clinical trial to participate in, you're going to go for one that has very strong existing results. And the last was very broad inclusion-exclusion criteria. One of the things that is particularly compelling about livoletide is its strong safety profile to date. Prader-Willi syndrome is a disease where patients already have a lot of underlying morbidity and mortality, where other drugs, including the first drug ever run in a pivotal study in Prader-Willi, have had some significant safety liabilities. So the safety profile here is very nice. It means we're able to recruit almost any patient with hyperphagia in Prader-Willi syndrome, ranging from 4 all the way up to 65 years old, a BMI all the way up to 65. If you had type 2 diabetes, that's fine as long as your insulin and other medications are stable. If you're taking growth hormone, that's fine as long as your medications are stable. So we were able to draw from a very broad patient population.
Very good. So tell me a bit more about your collaboration beyond the clinical trials, because the rare disease space is normally quite close. Companies tend to be closer to patient organisations, patients. So how do you interact with the patient organisations, the patients and the caregivers?
And we're very fortunate that in the Prader-Willi space there are some very engaged and very well organized and responsive patient advocacy groups. There's 2 in the United States. There's the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, and there's the Prader-Willi Association of the US. And then there's an international organization as well. And we've worked closely with both of them as partners, as sponsors, and as collaborators on multiple different levels. So they both had annual meetings this year that we had representatives at. We presented quite a few, actually. I think it was 6 or 7 posters or podium presentations at the congresses. We were able to hold both advisory boards with physicians as well as a patient and caregiver advisory board at these meetings. Everyone's showing up it was Orlando or New Orleans this year for the 2 meetings, and we can take advantage of the community, the broader community being there, to make sure we're taking the time to hear firsthand from physicians, from patients, from caregivers about what their needs really are and how we should design our clinical trials, how we should design our product, and how we should think about our ultimate commercialization efforts to meet their needs. And so we're really fortunate. It's also true that the foundations, both of them, they've done a lot to get out the word within the broader Prader-Willi community about the importance of participation in clinical trials, because we know that in all diseases, there's a very low rate of clinical trial participation. And the trials are going to go faster and the treatments are going to get to patients sooner if people are willing to participate in the trials. And so they did a lot to help talk about what trials are out there generally and encourage patients and families to consider those and participating in them.
What about the external regulatory and access environment? Because we're starting to see outcomes that matter to patients recognised, I think, a little bit more, sometimes different to clinical outcomes. How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, and that's one of the places where the Prader-Willi space has a huge advantage. I think there's a couple areas where this is an indication that is where drug development has a much cleaner path forward than in some other indications. There was another company, Zafgen, that previously developed a drug in the Prader-Willi space. They actually ran a pivotal study and showed some really impressive efficacy results. Unfortunately, also had some safety liabilities, including patient deaths, that required termination of that program, and that was really devastating to the broader community that felt like they were on the cusp of having a treatment. But through the work that Zafgen did with the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, with some key investigators at Vanderbilt and other institutions, and partnering with the FDA, they validated an endpoint that's now the primary endpoint for use in this. It's called the Hyperphagia Questionnaire, and it's a 9-item questionnaire that assesses patients' behaviors around food. And so that's considered the primary endpoint that is fully validated and is accepted by the FDA for approval of treatments in Prader-Willi. And you're right, that does measure the patient experience. It's how is their behavior actually changing in a placebo-controlled setting. And so that's what we're using as our primary endpoint. But it was thanks to Zafgen and others I mentioned that they got that endpoint validated, and we were able to step into this space, license use of that from the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, and apply it to our clinical study that's running right now. So it does take the broader community, ranging from other companies, the FDA, academics, and the patient advocacy group to move things along in a rare disease like this.
And on the market access environment, even in the US, we're starting to see a bit of pressure on drug pricing. And rare diseases, small patient numbers, high R&D costs. There's got to be an equation there that works for everybody.
Yeah.
How do you see that environment changing? Is it improving in terms of rare disease drugs coming to market?
I think there's a lot of ways to get at this, and I think in the US here we have a long way to go to fix our broader healthcare system to provide more ready access to care to everyone. I think reducing copays in particular is crucial. At the company level, it means making sure you're responsible in pricing, but recognizing and getting return for your shareholders on the investments you are making in long and expensive clinical trials. Prader-Willi has one other huge benefit that beyond just having a clear development and regulatory path, and that's that a large percentage of the patients are diagnosed. So patients with Prader-Willi, when they're born, actually don't have the characteristic hyperphagia that we all think of. They're actually born as floppy babies, hypotonia. They don't suckle well. They really have failure to thrive. And then between newborn and 5 years old, they go through a series of nutritional phases that are well characterized, and the dramatic changes that they show on the growth chart is part of the reason these children almost always are diagnosed by the time they're 5 years old. So by the time they reach 5 to 8 years old and they're exhibiting the classic hyperphagia, these obsessive food-seeking behaviors, they have already been identified, and hopefully therefore can be quickly put on a treatment once it's identified. The patients are known and they're in the system. So it's not like we're trying to take a disease of a few hundred patients and ultimately find them and grow it such that it requires ridiculous pricing in those early days because you're only going after a few patients. There are roughly 10,000 patients in the United States with Prader-Willi, and about 7,000 of them are in the age range where hyperphagia is manifesting, and they've already been diagnosed and are already being seen by a physician.
So just a few more things. You're very active on social media as a biotech leader, which is to some degree still quite unusual. And I noticed on your Twitter profile you talked about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro recently. Tell me about that experience.
It was an incredible, life-changing experience. I was part of a group of 27 executives and investors in the biotech industry that summited Kilimanjaro in July of this year. It was a week-long excursion led by Luke Timmerman through the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. I was really honored to be selected to join the group, but also it was pretty daunting. I had never been backpacking in my life, much less gone on a week-long trip. But they did a great job. Alpina Sense was our guide. They did a great job of preparing us, telling us what to bring, how to train, and what to expect. And it was amazing on 3 different levels for me. One was, a bucket list opportunity to climb the highest peak in Africa, over 19,000 feet. But it was also amazing to have been part of a group that ended up raising $1.6 million for cancer research, a huge amount that really
Sure.
I hope can impact things in a meaningful way. And the last but not least was the close relationships we made as a team. 27 of us really pulled together and made lifelong friendships, and that I really, really value. And so it was, I would say, a life-changing experience to be part of.
Very cool. So next sort of 4 or 5 years, if you can think that far ahead, what really excites you about where things go from here?
I really feel like our industry is on the cusp of some major breakthroughs. We're starting to see that in the immuno-oncology space with the impact of some of the checkpoint inhibitors, the CAR-T impact. If we can get some of that to start transforming and being more broadly accessible, there's huge opportunity. Outside of oncology, we're starting to finally see some impact in gene therapy. We've seen over the last 2 decades that I've been working in the industry a real transformation in the inflammation and immunology therapeutic area. As you already noted, we're really starting to impact rare diseases in a profound way, and I expect that over the next several years we're going to see that particularly be true in Prader-Willi syndrome. I think the next horizon that we still have a ways to go is neuroscience, and I don't know if in the next 3 to 5 years we're going to get there, but I think in the next 5 to 10 we're going to start seeing some evolution there as well that's really needed. So I've been in this industry a little over 20 years, and to watch a number of diseases ranging from some of the leukemias to psoriasis to hepatitis C be fundamentally treated in a different way today than they were is incredibly gratifying.
Yeah. And very exciting, I agree. There's a lot of cool stuff going on.
Yeah, it's what gets you out of bed each day, gets us to work these crazy hours. I love the people I get to interact with. I love geeking out on the science, but we're all in this ultimately to impact the patients.
Sure. And finally, if you think about your career and everything that you've learned, if you were to go back in time to a younger Julia at the start of your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
That's a tough one. I would say that the easiest thing to tell myself earlier is it's a long road, and there's going to be time, and pace yourself and think and step back and take care of yourself at times. Pay attention to everyone around you, appreciate the people around you, and focus on moving one step at a time forward on things. You and I were discussing some of the lessons I took from Kilimanjaro, and those have been ones I've really internalized this year about how there needs to be balance in life between work and family, taking care of yourself so that you can bring your full self to work. And so if I could have learned some of those lessons maybe a little earlier in my career, I could have been more effective at times, been more patient both at work at home at times, and working on striving to continue to improve.
Julia, thanks very much. It's been great speaking with you, and best of luck for the future.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.